Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another Friday review. Today I will be giving my thoughts on Nostalgia, the brand new 6th album from the original leaders of the new wave, a traditional heavy metal movement that is Sweden's Enforcer, released on May 5th via the Nuclear Blast Records label, a label that they've been with since 2013's Death by Fire. So, without further ado, let's begin. Now, before I get into giving my thoughts on Nostalgia, you know what I have to do. I have to do a track list rundown so I can tell you folks what are the songs that are on this album, how many tracks that are on this album, and what is the time length for this album. Since this album consists a total of 13 tracks, it clocks in at the length of 41 minutes and 39 seconds. So, these 13 tracks are, well, beginning with the very short, sort of atmospheric I can't say instrumental, but it's more of an intro. But it's titled Armageddon. Then, of course, this is used as a way to build up to Unshackle Me. Then, of course, we then get into Coming Alive, Heartbeats, Demon, Kiss of Death, the title track, No Tomorrow, At the End of the Rainbow, Metal Supremacia, White Lights in the USA, Keep the Flame Alive, and then finally ending with When the Thunder Roars, parentheses, Crossfire. So there you go, folks. There's your 13 tracks. You know what that sound is, folks. That is the sound of my notes. So what are my thoughts? I gotta be honest with you all. As much as I find this album to be an improvement over 2019's most polarizing album, that was the infamous Zenith, but when I had first listened to Zenith, and I even said this in my review for that album, that Zenith was not only going to change quite a bit to their approach to songwriting and construction, but even in the production department as well. And while this album is much more straightforward and lessons on the experimentation, though there still is some experimentation that is present here, which I'll point out more as this goes on. It's just much more simplified. Gone are the pounding epics of like Mask of Red Death, Sacrificed, Below the Slumber, Hungry They Will Come, and of course, ferocious barn burners of the past. Instead, in their place is more emphasis on simplified rockers with a sort of pop sheen-like structuring and even in writing. Even the speed metal songs that are present on here are severely polished up. Even if the attempt of them trying to go back to the sound of Death by Fire and possibly, of course, Diamonds is somewhat true, it still sounds clean and just way more polished and doesn't hold the same grit of an album like Death by Fire, let alone From Beyond. I don't want to make things too negative here, so what I'll do is I'll point out the tracks that I feel are a slight return to that classic Enforcer sound. Like, for example, Coming Alive, Kiss of Death, which was the first song to be released, dating all the way back to 2021 when the recording process for this album first started taking place. At the End of the Rainbow, the second to have been released prior to this album, again also in 2021. It's a great rainbowish / Uli era Scorpions inspired speed metal track with just a great majestic like middle portion with a nicely put together guitar solo. Then of course the ode to Spain's metal scene with Metal Supremacia, and of course When the Thunder Roars, parentheses, Crossfire. They all come across as vintage Enforcer, even of course with the polished production and of course some slight experimentation. Take for example that sort of middle portion in When the Thunder Roars, parentheses, Crossfire. But where the album still feels like a small continuation of Zenith, and of course, again, just beginning with the more simplistic, sort of poppier kind of writing sheen. I know they flirted with this in the past with certain songs, but it's just way more amplified on this album than anything before. Maybe, you know what, AOR is probably a better description to be used here, but again, even a lot of AOR acts of like the 1980s, for example, all kind of had a sort of pop-like writing sheen to them, you know, just to kind of point out the sort of differences or descriptions or something, you know, to try and get a lot more detailed here. But again, especially with songs like Unshackle Me, which is a shredding hard rocker that is purely built around very melodic and sort of semi-pop sheen structuring. Heartbeats, kind of a power ballad in a way in the vein of 80s Scorpions and Europe, especially which their influence is pretty evident here. Again, in the past, Olaf has shown a lot of his just admiration and appreciation for an album like The Final Countdown, especially some of the other songs on that album that wasn't, you know, the title track. And of course, the title track, which is easily the album's ballad. This, of course, divided some audiences when it first was released. Of course, it doesn't help that the three previous release tracks kind of led people to believe that this album was going to be a return to form. It's actually a nicely done song. At first, I didn't quite care for it, but since owning it and giving the album repeated listens, it's grown on me. But where I feel really that sort of experimentation that you are beginning to really get and hear on Zenith is really present with the songs, for example here, White Lights in the USA and Keep the Flame Alive. They are both built around AOR-like structuring, but continues that same songwriting again, like I've stated, from Zenith, especially with Keep the Flame Alive, which has this combination of pop-like beats and just their straightforward metal riffing. It's a crazy combination, and it's still one that I still got a hard time getting into. To me, it's this album's weakest spot. Again, I understand where they want to do, again, trying to experiment and broaden things out, but for some reason, it just doesn't work for me. And of course, I don't even quite care for White Lights in the USA. To me, it just comes across as filler. Same kind of goes for with Keep the Flame Alive. Again, I'm not trying to be as hard on this album as I kind of was on Zenith, which, to kind of point out, if you go back and actually, watch my review for Zenith, since I recorded that review after my really early impressions of Zenith, I still wasn't quite hard on that album in that review, but as I kept listening to that album after I had cut my review in 2019, especially when it came around to my album of the year stuff for 2019, it was when my thoughts really began to really change, and they really differed from my original thoughts, and that's why to this day I have become much more harder on Zenith than I was around the first time when I was, because again, I like to be more optimistic and be a little more just very open-minded in things, but sometimes you kind of have to just be honest with yourself, you know, especially with your gut feeling. You just have to, and that's how I just end up feeling with Zenith as time went on. Again, I really do think that this album here is a step up, but even with that said, it's just not the same Enforcer to me, you know, that released Death by Fire and From Beyond. I do see that Enforcer are wanting to branch out here, though, by coming up with the formula that is especially really changing up their formula to create something else that is possibly going to come across as being accessible to a newer audience. Scorpions did it. Look where it got them. Judas Priest did it. Crocus, who I just covered already, tried it. Def Leppard, of course, another band that Olaf Wickstrand has shown a lot of appreciation over the years. changed their style, and look where they are at now. And with Olaf in the past, like I've stated, showing signs by just talking about his love for Def Leppard, Europe, and Scorpions, and with Enforcer constructing things to be more simple, we may have to just accept and just adapt with what Enforcer are doing now. Who knows if when they will ever go back and revisit their more heavy, slightly more epic material, but for now, I don't think things are going to change anytime soon, so you either have to either love it or you're going to just hate it. And I think I'm just seeing a big divide within this audience, and right now it's given me sort of conflicting opinions and stuff. My views are starting to kind of conflict here because of I don't want to be one of those like how I am now with Def Leppard, where I just completely jumped ship and just am no longer going to just support or follow them because of what they've done to themselves musically. And I understand that they did it for the money, and I just don't want that same thing that kind of happened, for me with Enforcer. Like even some people have kind of viewed, Metallica these days, what they are with them right now. It's still a very big divided audience, and I just don't want that to happen with Enforcer, but at this point, it may be possible. But I don't want to try and go on for too long, but because I've given the thoughts that I've wanted to give out, I've said all that I've wanted to say about nostalgia, but even with all the good things, there's still plenty of things that I'm just not as still accepting of. It's a very hard thing for me to kind of accept here, and it's going to take a lot more time to get used to. So there it is. Those are my thoughts right now on nostalgia. So there it is, folks. So nostalgia from Enforcer. What is my final verdict, my final rating for this album? Well, I know that in my review, because I went back and watched it to kind of see what was the rating, because I don't have the notes of the papers with me right now, because again, they're all the way back up at my parents' house in Susanville, where I originally was doing a lot of these reviews before last year, So I don't have a lot of that stuff with me, so I had to go back to my video and on YouTube to watch it and see what was my original rating. And again, I give it a kind of an 8 out of 10. But now I don't know I would give that kind of rating. And right now I think I would give a much more lower rating, because right now the rating that I'm going to be giving here to Enforcer is since I got the rating number here on my notes there, you kind of briefly saw it. It was a 7.95 out of 10. That's as high I feel like I'm going to give this album. Because, again, this is a much more straightforward album compared to Zenith. But, again, there's just something different about them. Zenith changed their sound. And I think they're going to continue with this sound. They're going to expand on it, explore it even more further, possibly. We'll see what happens. But right now, I think it's very easy to just see that this is a much more different Enforcer. Even if some of the same band members are here, it's just a lot different, and it's just a similar situation that's going on that happened with bands like Scorpions and Judas Priest, Def Leppard, and so on. So we'll see where it gets Enforcer, where it gets them. But maybe it's right now, it's just where their heads are at right now, creatively and writing-wise, So, more power to the guys in Enforcer. And again, I don't think this is a bad album by any means. It's just that it's just it's just a little bit conflicting, to kind of get used to right now. But we'll see where I feel like, by the end of this year. But right now, these are my thoughts, and that is my current rating. So, if you've actually have given a listen to Nostalgia, if they are positive or negative, you can leave those thoughts, in the comment section below. But if you've never checked out Nostalgia and you're kind of on the fence on whether or not you're going to like it or you're going to love it because of after they had released Zenith, just give it a try and see if you even like it, if it's worth, purchasing, worth your money, if it's worth your time, So there you go, folks. there's my overall thoughts on nostalgia. So that's it. This is Heavy Thrasher saying I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.